registered migration agent in Australia, Sydney, Australia. I've been a registered migration agent for 8.5 years in Australia. Now, registered migration agents are allowed by law in Australia to provide immigration assistance to anyone who wishes to apply for any visas for Australia. I've worked as an agent. I made a mistake, for 6.5 years. And prior to that, I worked for the Department of Immigration, the Australian government department that makes decisions for the visas, for 8.5 years. In today's seminar, we're going to have a pretty open discussion. I would like to give you some information about different visa types, different opportunities for Australia. Now, Australia is becoming more and more popular for people from Uzbekistan to come to study either a bachelor degree, a master's degree, or English. And it's also becoming more popular for people to come to work in Australia because of the high wages and because of the ability to get a permanent visa. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with permanent visas, a permanent visa is a visa that allows you to stay in Australia forever. It gives you the same rights as an Australian citizen, with the exception of voting. So you can work, you can get subsidized healthcare system assistance, you can come in and out as many times as you wish. Something similar to the American green card, but the difference is that there's no lottery. It's based on your profession. You can apply for a visa based on what you have worked and studied. Now, if you would like to ask questions during this meeting, maybe just send your questions in the chat box there, and then we'll endeavor to answer them. I want to show you something before we continue. I think this is quite important. We're seeing a lot of visas being applied for by agents or non-registered agents in Uzbekistan and other countries, and there's a lot of refusals. So I want to give you a bit of information about what a migration agent is and what they do. So I'm sharing my screen with you now. If you look at this screen, this is an Australian government website, mara.gov.au. So Australian Government Department of Home Affairs. This is the organization that regulates visas and also registration for agents. So if you do a search in the field over here, search for registered agent, we'll wait for the window to open, and you can type in the agent's first name. There's only one, Laza. So we do a search with the first name, and this is what comes up. So this is my name, this is my company. When you click on my name, wait until it loads, and you'll be able to see information about my registration. As a migration agent, we need to renew our registration every single year with this department, with this government department, which means that the department needs to make sure that we're continuously studying because the migration law in Australia changes. And also, the department must ensure that we are honest and we don't have any criminal convictions. Messages from people saying nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you as well. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat. Apart from that, we have a lot of questions that came in from before the seminar. This seminar is being recorded. We're going to have some people that are unfortunately are not able to attend. However, they'll be able to watch the recording at a later stage. So the first question, I'm going to read the question out and then I'll provide the answer where it's possible. Sometimes I wouldn't be able to answer a question because it could contain personal information, or it could be that I need more information so I can get a better understanding of the situation. The first question, I'm a researcher in South Korea. I have 2.5 years of experience. I graduated a master course in agricultural sphere. Can I apply for a job or research in Board of Australia? Okay. So at the moment, there's a big demand for agricultural jobs in Australia. Depending on what type of agricultural field that you're specializing in, you may potentially be able to obtain a visa that allows you to live and work in Australia forever. However, I need to determine how old you are, what is your English language level, if your qualification and work experience can be recognized. So theoretically speaking, yes, you can get a work visa, but better than that, you can also get a permanent visa. The difference between a work visa is that work visa is usually between 2 to 4 years, and you need to be sponsored by employer every single time you want to renew this visa. You also need to have your own private insurance. And if you have a family with children, usually you need to pay school fees. But with a profession like yours, you might be eligible to get a permanent visa, which means that you don't have expenses for schools. If you have children, your children will go to school for free. You don't have to pay health insurance because you'll be covered by Australian government Medicare scheme. So going to most GPs will be for free. And you don't have to have a sponsor. There are ways where you can apply for a permanent visa through a sponsor, but there are also ways where you can apply independently. Now, depending on your particular situation, different visa options might be available to you. There are many different visa pathways, many different ways you can obtain a permanent visa, depending on your work, your skill, your studies. So yes, you do have a possibility to apply for a work and or permanent visa. However, permanent visa is more beneficial because it's going to allow you to work forever, stay forever. Ultimately, it can allow you to get an Australian citizenship as well, meaning you can have an Australian passport to travel in and out of Australia. Now, I know that traveling with Uzbek passport is a little bit difficult sometimes. I have a lot of clients who've applied for visas by themselves or through agents in other countries, and they've received refusals. So if you get an Australian passport, traveling is going to be quite easy. Yeah, potentially I can help you. So there's a question about help. Yes, potentially I can help you, but I really need to understand more about your case. But from what you've told me, it sounds positive. Okay. We're gonna go to the next question now. So just give me 1 second. I need to scroll down. First of all, thank you for your effort. Thank you very much as well for joining our seminar. We have been working with people from Uzbekistan, regardless of whether they're living in Uzbekistan or Korea and Japan for about a year now, a bit more than a year. So yeah, thank you for joining the seminar. I'm working in Korea for a company as a sales manager for more than 5 years. What are the requirements to get a visa for Australia? So it really depends on what type of visa you're after. There are many different types of visas, as I mentioned. There's going to be some major changes in the visa requirements and the visa law soon. 1st of July, we're expecting a lot of those. So that's 2 months away from now. However, if you do a quick search on the website, on Google, just do a SOL list search. Now make sure that you're looking at the Australian government website, Australian Department of Home Affairs. It has to have that little thing here, gov. If it doesn't say gov, you might be looking at old or inaccurate information. Always make sure you go to the government website. Same as this, if you're checking an agent, if you're checking if someone has a registration, if someone is allowed to assist people with their visas, make sure that you're looking at the gov. Yeah, that's an official government website. Same is here. So when we do a quick search, we get a list of visas that come up. Now, different visas from these fields here would be applicable to different people. However, when we click on that section here, those are the legislative instruments, we get different types of instruments. In your case, we'll click on this instrument here. And again, please be mindful that this will change in probably 2 months' time. So I'm just giving you a rough example, but in 2 months' time, the system will change a little bit. For the better, I think it's going to become easier for people to apply for their visas because so many people, Australia needs so many workers at the moment. So it's really, really, the demand is really, really big for workers, and that's why the government is making it easier for people to get visas. So let me go back to this question. What are we going for as the visa? Sorry, what was the profession? Some sort of a manager. So sales manager. Let's have a look if we can find something with sales. Now, just because we don't find sales, I'm not saying that we're not going to find it, but if we don't, we might be able to see other professions that are related. Now, if we look at this sales and marketing manager, if your profession falls within this field here, at the moment, you will be eligible for a few different visa types. One of them would be a work visa. The second one would be a state-sponsored visa, which is a permanent visa. Also, as I mentioned, there'll be changes coming up. The government will make it easier for people in this list over here to obtain a permanent visa through employer sponsorship. So you can work for an employer for a period of time, usually 3 years, and after that you'll be able to apply for a permanent visa. Now, these periods might change in July, but the idea would remain the same. You work for an employer, and after 3 months you can apply for permanent. However, there could be other visa options for you as well, but I wouldn't be able to give you this information until I understand a little bit more about you, what your age is, what your English language skills are, if you're able to get a skills assessment. So you have a number of sales positions. You need to decide which one is most relevant to you, if you can meet the requirements. So yes, there are different visa options in your case. The main criteria would be you to meet the English level requirements. Now, English level requirements are different for different visas. So depending on which visa you'll be aiming for, the requirement will be different. To be on the safe side, usually a minimum of 6 in each component on IELTS is required. However, there are exemptions to that. You can go through a pathway where a lower mark would be enough. Okay. Then you need to have your profession recognized in Australia. And then depending on which visa you're going for, whether it will be the skilled independent or, well, in your case, you need to be sponsored by a state at the moment. You need to have enough points for that application. If you go through a different visa pathway where you'll be sponsored by an employer, the requirements will be different. So as I said, if you have a look at this section here, you have a list of visas, right? You have a lot of visas. Each visa has its own criteria. So it's very difficult without having more specific information for me to tell you what the criteria are. I hope that answers your question. You can do some research if you wish, or you can book a consultation with us and we're going to look at your case in more detail, and then we'll be able to provide you with more information. So the next question is, hello there. I'm San and I'm 37 years old. Currently, I'm working in Dubai airport service agent. I have a bachelor degree in mechanical engineering. That's a very good degree from Uzbekistan, but I don't have any official experience in mechanical engineering. So the mechanical engineering is a very good degree, but if you don't have experience, that makes it very difficult to get the skills recognition. And if you don't get the skills recognition, you might not be able to apply for a permanent visa. My wife is 36 years old, bachelor degree in English teacher, and she's more than 3 years experience. 3 kids, 10, 7. Okay, coach. I used to work in Australia as an agriculture hub under the Australian agriculture exchange program. Okay. 416. That was a long time ago. I don't even remember this visa disagreement with Uzbekistan. So your question is a little bit complex. In terms of your profession, I think it will be difficult for you to get a permanent visa based on your education because you don't have experience. For your wife, as an English teacher, she may be able to meet some of the requirements for skills assessment, but not all. So the chances are that she'll need to study more in order to become a teacher. Now, teachers are in demand, and it is possible to get a work visa or a permanent visa. However, the chances are that she'll need to study for at least 2 years in Australia, maybe even more, at a bachelor level or above. So that's going to be quite expensive. And if you have 3 kids, if you have to send them to school and you don't have permanent visa, it's going to be quite expensive, to be honest with you. Now, I don't remember this 416 visa. Never actually dealt with. There's about 120 different visas and visa subclasses. Visa streams, sorry. And I haven't really dealt with this one here. Yeah. It's an old visa. 2016 it closed. I've never dealt with it. I'm not really sure, to be honest. If you want, I can do further research for you, but I'm not familiar with this visa. I've never dealt with it. If you want more research, if you need more information, we can speak separately. As this visa hasn't existed for a while. And when I was working for the department, I used to work for the Department of Immigration this stage. I've never worked in that section. I've worked in many different sections, student visas, some of the permanent visas, some of the work visa sections, but never in here. Okay, hope this helps you a little bit. Let me just scroll down to the next question. Nice to meet you. Hello, mister. I'm 3/4 level. I don't really understand what that means. What is 3/4 level? We don't really have this type of scoring, I guess. I have 1 year. Okay, 1 year to graduate. Sorry, 1 year. So you want to study a master degree in Australia. Look, the sooner you start preparing, the better for you, because at the moment, as I mentioned before, the Australian government needs a lot of international workers, a lot. But because of this, there's so many people applying. There's a very big queue. There's a long waiting list for people to get a decision on their visas. So sometimes it takes 2 months, and I'm hearing from others that it's taking much longer than 2 months. So at least 6 months in advance, I suggest you start applying for university, and that way you have enough time to apply for the visa. Otherwise, you might miss the deadline, and it might be very stressful for you. So at the moment, the way things are going, because it's so busy, at least 6 months in advance, at least, if you want to start a master degree. And just keep in mind that because there's also so many international students applying, the waiting period for the school or for the university to assess you and to tell you whether you're being accepted or not is very long. So it might take them 1 month or more for them to say, yeah, we accept you. No, we don't accept you. If they don't accept you, you have to look for another university. So what I suggest is to apply for a number of universities at the same time. Speak to Shahzoda, please. She's the educational agent. She deals with education. I predominantly deal with visas because I used to work for the department. My job was to give information to people about different visas and to make decisions on visas. And now I studied migration, I mean, not now, but I studied migration law, and I help people with visas. So the educational aspect is Shahzoda. So maybe just ask her more questions about this. But from my experience, it's best to apply for more than one course and more than one university if it's a master degree. If you don't speak English, and your intention is to go and study in Australia, if you can write your question in Russian, I can understand Russian, but I cannot understand Uzbek. Sorry, can you translate that for me, please?
Yeah, I will translate it. He's
Thank you.
29 years old. He has finished IT college in Japan, in Japan. Right now, he's working in Japan in IT sphere. The question, um, in Australia, is it possible to study for 1 year in the English course and
Mhm,
then apply for the IT course?
mhm.
No, no, no. First, they will study in the language course and then apply for the work in the IT sphere. In order to work in IT sphere in Australia, does it require a diploma or something specific major document?
At the moment, you need a bachelor at least. So at the moment, we'll go back to this list that we're looking at. The only thing is we're going to go to, when it's not this list, it's this list here. The same link, but a different list. And if we look at the professions, most of the IT professions are those ones here. If you can see my screen, analyst programmer, developer programmer, software engineer, software and applications programmer, ICT, security specialist, computer network and systems engineer. So those are the main computing professions. Now, some of them have multiple streams. So if we double click on this number and we do a search, now this thing is called an ANSCO code. Don't click on this. You need to look at the official website. So we type in ABS, which stands for Australian Bureau of Statistics. Again, it has to be a .gov.au. You have to see the gov. If it's not gov, you might be looking at the wrong information. So it has to have .gov to make sure that it's official government website. Otherwise, there's a lot of other sites that contain information, but we don't know if they're. Now, if you look at these, the profession of software and applications programmer is closely related to analyst programmer, developer programmer, software engineer, software tester, software and application programmer. So if you have a bachelor degree, so most of these occupations, if we look at this section, the skills commensurate with a bachelor degree or higher. So it is possible to get a skills assessment probably with a diploma and a work experience, but I'm not sure until I actually apply for you. So the safest option, the safest pathway is to apply for university and get a bachelor in your field. If you get a bachelor degree, then you'll be eligible to get both work visas and permanent visas. You can get both in Australia. And these professions are in demand. So there's a lot of demand for anyone who deals with software and some aspects of IT, a lot. So it's a good profession, but you might need to do a bachelor. Now, in terms of English language, it is possible to apply for an English language course as long as you meet the requirements. You have sufficient funds to cover yourself, and you have to justify why you're studying English. But it's possible, theoretically speaking. But we have to assess your case individually. I hope this helps you. Okay. Now, is there a type of visa similar to the green card? Yes. So I think that the Australian version of the green card, we don't call it green card. It's called a permanent visa. I think it's better than the green card because the green card is a lottery. You apply and they pick you randomly. In Australia, I showed you a window a second ago. Now, these are not all the visas. The green card version is called permanent visa in Australia, permanent residency. These are some of the visas that are permanent. So 189, 190, 186, the 187, and from this skilled list, there's one more which hasn't been included. It's 191 subclass. These visas lead you to a permanent visa, meaning you can stay, live, work as long as you wish, study. If you get this visa, you can bring your wife, or if you're a woman, you can bring your husband. You can bring your children. Your children can study at school for free. So yes, there are permanent visas in Australia. Now, these ones here are mainly for people who apply through their skills. So if you're a computer programmer, software developer, or if you're a chef, or if you are an engineer, you can get this permanent visa and then move and live in Australia permanently. You can either apply by yourself initially, or you can apply with your whole family. If you apply by yourself initially, later on, you can decide to bring your family once you establish yourself. So yes, Australia does have permanent visas, similar to green card, but in my opinion, it's better than a green card because as long as you meet the requirements and you're sponsored by a worker, or you meet the requirements and you have enough points and are invited, you're going to get the visa. Whereas a green card, it's a lottery and it's luck. There are other visas, but again, until I have more information about you, I wouldn't really know if you're eligible for another visa. So for example, if you have a wife in Australia, you can get a permanent visa because you have a wife in Australia. If you have children in Australia, they may be able to sponsor you. You can get a permanent visa because of that. Okay, and vice versa. If you have a permanent visa in Australia, you can bring your parents, for example, if they meet the requirements. I hope this answers your question. Let's go down. Hi again, I'm Osana again. I'm still in contact with Australian host family. They're willing to sponsor you. So host family, if you meet the language requirements, the skill requirements, and you find a job in a rural area, they may somehow be beneficial to you to help you find a job and support you, but on their own, they're not able to sponsor you, right? So they might be of help to you if you're preparing an application to move to Australia permanently, but they on their own are not able to help you to get a permanent visa, right? I hope that sort of answers your question. It could be of help, but it doesn't guarantee a visa on its own and doesn't contribute to either points or something similar to that. So let's go to the next question. Hello, I'm currently a freshman in Korea. Can I transfer my studies to Australia and continue there? Technically, yes, you can, as long as you meet the requirements. Now, in Australia, we don't have this concept of freshman. I think that's an American term. So what I suppose you mean is first year university. So if this is the case, yes, you can. That's perfectly fine. Um, However, you still need to meet the requirements for the university that you're applying for. So you need to speak to Shehzada about this because this deals more with the educational aspect of things. How to find a university, how to find a course, applying for a course, and then depending on what you're studying and where you're studying in Korea, that will determine what and how much of your studies will be recognized in Australia. So the Australian university might say, we don't recognize anything, you have to start from the beginning. Or they might say, yeah, we recognize 6 months and you have to do the rest here. So theoretically, it is possible. From the visa aspect, when you're applying for an Australian visa, you need to meet the financial requirements unless you have a sponsorship. So meaning that you have to provide information to support your claim that you can live in Australia. And also you will need to provide information about your ties to Korea or to Uzbekistan or any other country. So you have to prove that after your studies in Australia, you're not going to try to stay permanently. Having said that, many people who move to Australia to study, they like it so much, they find jobs, they find friends, they get a house or a unit. As long as they meet the requirements for a permanent visa or for a work visa, they apply for those visas afterwards. However, your initial intentions when applying for the visa should be that you're only going to Australia to study and then you're going to go back home. So as long as you meet the requirements, yes, it's possible for you to transfer. So from the educational point of view, Shahzoda can help you because she's the educational agent. I can only provide you information about the visas. Okay. Now let's continue. Australia, hello. Sorry, give me 1 second. Let me scroll down. If you show that you have enough money in the bank, we can apply with my family and my wife. I read that it's very difficult to get a visa for PR after graduating school in a big city. Is that true? It could be true. Yes, it could be true. So if you're in a big city like Sydney or Melbourne, and if you studied a profession that has been studied by many other people, the competition would be very high and it's difficult to receive an invitation unless you have a sponsor, unless you have a job in that field and your sponsor is willing to support you. Then you can get permanent residency as long as your profession is in the list. However, there are certain professions which are in so much demand that it doesn't really matter where you are. Some of those professions at the moment are chefs, and most of the computer software professions. So if you're a software architect or engineer, it doesn't really matter where you are because there's such a demand, as long as you meet the requirements for the visa. Now, we're expecting big changes in July because the Australian government wants to accept more permanent migrants. And if this does happen and you have a profession on the list which is in demand, it's going to become easier for you to get permanent residency. However, we have to break down your question into two. You're talking about if you have enough money, can you and your wife go to Australia? This is not linked to a permanent visa. Permanent visas do not require you to have a lot of money. Permanent visas usually require you to prove that you have a skill and a qualification and work experience and English level language, and you're at a certain age, and then you can apply for the visa. Or you have an employer who's paying you a certain amount of money. So your question has to be broken into two. If you have enough money, enough funds, or the more money or the more funds you have, the more likely that you'll be granted a student visa because you can satisfy the case officer that you're not planning to go in Australia and run away, for example. This is also a requirement for visitor visas. You need to show funds. However, if you're aiming for permanent residency, usually funds is not a requirement. I hope that answers your question. Next one. How can I apply for a job as a researcher in Australia? I have more 3 years experience. So it depends on what kind of a researcher you are. I guess you'll be looking at working in a university. If you're looking at to work at a university, the best way would be to search the individual university websites, and also you can have a look at this site here, Seek. So I've given a few seminars to people from Uzbekistan. They're asking me how much money you can make. So hotel receptionist. So these are just general jobs. I can't really do a search unless I know what kind of a researcher you are, but you get the idea. Just visit this site here, seek.com.au, and you can search for jobs. So for example, if you want to search something, I don't know, what can you research? What kind of a research would you be? Let's say you do something with education, and you want to search in Sydney. So I grew up in Sydney, so that's why I'm choosing Sydney. Let's see what comes up. Yeah, deputy council, vice council. So if you do a search like that, you'll be able to find university jobs, and then universities would be able to sponsor you. Especially if you have done a PhD, you can apply for either permanent visa or work visa quite easily because PhD is in the skills list. Now, sorry, where are the questions? Please tell me about work visas too. One second, one second, one second, one second. We have to, we have to. Most free. Okay, that one. Read that one. Hello. First of all, thank you very much for the offer. Thank you very much for joining us as well. What are the requirements to obtain Australian tourist visa and how long would it take? Okay, so it really depends on what country you're in because different offices will be processing the tourist visa. Now there's two different types of tourist visas. Well, there's more than two types, but the two types which you can potentially apply for. One is if you have family in Australia, and one if you don't. The requirements, most of the requirements are listed on the website. However, there are things that you can think of and submit that are not included in the website because they would be individually applicable only to you. As a summary, just as an idea, you would need to prove to the case officer that you are going to be a genuine temporary entrant, meaning you're going to visit Australia, stay in Australia for the purpose of a visit or holiday, and then you would leave Australia. The way you would prove this is to provide that you have something or strong reasons to return to either Korea or Uzbekistan. Depending where you're from, I guess you'll be in Korea because most of the people here will be from Korea. Having said that, the applications are quite difficult for people from Uzbekistan to get a visitor visa. A large reason for that is the processing center that makes decisions for Uzbek applicants, for visitor visas specifically, are quite strict and quite difficult to deal with. So it pays to prepare very, very well. Again, depending on the circumstances, if, for example, you're a PhD student, just as an example, and you're part way through your PhD, when making the application, you can show documents that you're doing your PhD. And of course, you'd say, well, I'm doing my PhD. I'm not going to abandon my PhD and remain in Australia. I have to return to Korea to finish off my studies, to graduate, to get my PhD, because that would increase my likelihood of obtaining a job or would increase my prospects of a better life. So the requirements for a visitor visa are difficult to determine. There are certain pointers on the website, but it's an individual application depending on your individual circumstances. I hope that gives you a bit of an overview and gives you a direction on where to search for information. How long it will take is difficult to say because so many people are applying at the moment. Usually for a visitor visa, probably about 1 month at the moment, but it could be more because more and more people are applying. More and more people are applying to go to Australia, especially now when these changes take place on, I think, 1st of July. It will be even busier. Hope this helps. Now, can we take citizen visa after graduate? Citizen. Okay, so your question has to be broken down into a few sections. You may be eligible to get a permanent visa, which is, as I mentioned before, similar to the American green card, but more predictable. If you meet the requirements in Australia, the chances of getting that visa are higher than getting a green card in America. If you have a qualification and work experience and you meet the requirements for one of the permanent visas, and there are many different types of permanent visas, as we mentioned in this list over here, right? Those are just some of them. If you meet the requirements for one of those visas here, you can obtain citizenship a few years later, depending on your individual circumstances. So usually you need to be in Australia for 4 years, one of which needs to be on a permanent visa. And then if you don't have any convictions and you meet all the requirements, you can become an Australian citizen. Yes. And you can get an Australian passport and you can travel on that passport. So it's possible, but without knowing what your master degree is, without knowing your work experience, without knowing your age, without knowing your potential skills assessment level, I can't give you a certain answer, but yes, it is possible. Generally, it's possible. Can you guarantee to get a tourist visa? How many percent of the visa will be issued and will be held? Okay. So guaranteeing is not possible. If anyone guarantees you a visa, especially a tourist or a student visa, they're lying to you. I can increase your chances of obtaining a tourist visa by reviewing your case, understanding your particular situation, and telling you what documents to prepare and how to apply. I can help you to apply. But I mean, even as an agent, we are specifically instructed that we cannot guarantee visas. We can increase your chances. Sometimes you can increase your chances a lot, but we cannot guarantee. It's like, imagine that you have, I don't know, you have a car crash and you hurt someone while driving and you go to court and there's a possibility of you going to jail. You will try to find the best possible lawyer to represent you, to reduce your chances of going to jail. But even the best possible lawyer cannot stop you, cannot save you. Ultimately, maybe they can reduce your term or give you community service, but no one can guarantee you're not going to go to jail. This depends on the judge. The same principle applies. We can increase your chances of getting the visa, but no one is allowed to guarantee. If someone guarantees you a visa, they're lying to you. Okay, they're just convincing you. They're giving you false hope so they can take your money. And it's even written somewhere. You can do search on the Australian government website. I'm not too familiar where it is now. I've searched it for other people before. Using immigration. This is New South. This is Victorian government. This is the Australian government website. So migration can advise you on the most appropriate visa. Complete visa application form, prepare supporting documents, information, submit application, blah, blah, blah. Do you have to complain applicant programs? Doesn't really say here. Using immigration agent. Find immigration consumer guide. This could be useful. So this comes from the Australian government website. Everyone can see this. immihomeaffairs.gov.au. So a registered migration agent cannot guarantee a visa. They can help you to increase your chances, but they cannot guarantee it. So if someone tells you, I'll guarantee a visa for you, that means they're lying. They're not honest. Okay, let's continue. Sorry, 1 second. Many questions are coming. Transfer, what language? The easiest, best way to go to Australia. This question, unfortunately, is not possible to be answered. If you, for example, decide to go to Australia on a visitor visa, if you don't meet the requirements for a visitor visa, you'll be refused. It really depends on your intentions as well. Easiest is cheapest. There's 120 visa and visa streams, and I don't know which one is going to be appropriate for you. So unfortunately, I don't know what to say to this question, how to answer it. Is it possible to change visa status after visiting Australia? Sometimes it is. It really depends on what visa you're in Australia with. So sometimes if you get a visitor visa, you might not be able to change your status. So you might not be able to apply for another visa. The other problem is, in terms of your question, if you go to Australia on a tourist visa and somehow the immigration staff on the airport find out that you're intending to apply for a student visa, once you're in Australia, they can cancel your tourist visa and send you back. Even if you go through, usually the people who apply for tourist visas and then from Australia apply for a student visa, they have longer waiting periods. So instead of waiting 2 to 3 months for decision, roughly, I'm not sure how long it's going to take, you might have to wait for 11 months. And in these 11 months, you're not allowed to work. You have no work permission. Because most student visas, I mean, all student visas give you the right to work. If you're on a visitor visa, there'll be no right to work. So it's going to be very difficult for you to support yourself. So technically what you're saying is possible, but there's a lot of risk involved and you might have to spend so much money without the ability to work as well. So I don't think it's a good option for you. The risk is not worth it, in my opinion. I mean, I know people that have done that, but it's difficult. What language level requirements for permanent visa? Okay, it really depends on the permanent visa and depends on because there's many different permanent visas. Generally speaking, you need to have a 6 in IELTS in each component. However, sometimes you might need to get a higher score. At the same time, if you go to a regional area that's outside of a big city, and you go through a special agreement, you might be able to go with an IELTS of 5 in each component. But again, it depends on your profession because some professions require you to have a very high level of English. So if you're a nurse, I think it was an IELTS 7 or 7.5, I don't remember, for registration. So it depends on both the profession and it depends on what visa you're applying for and where you are. So if you're in a regional area, it's going to be a bit easier in terms of English, possibly, if you go through a particular agreement. So I study in the National University of Uzbekistan. My faculty is political science and I can transfer my studies to Australia. So Duolingo is not recognized in Australia, especially for visas. So that is not going to help you. Now, in terms of transferring a course, yeah, that's possible as long as you meet the requirements for that particular course. And then you need to have the visa requirements met too. In terms of the visa requirements, the most important one is to show that you have sufficient funds to cover your stay in Australia and also to have sufficient funds to pay for your fees unless you get a scholarship. There are quite a lot of people from Uzbekistan that are coming to Australia at the moment on scholarships. They get scholarships from the Uzbek government. If you get that, that is going to be very beneficial and very helpful to you. Now, if we look at the different language tests that are accepted, we have IELTS, we have TOEFL, we have PTE, we have OET, and we have Cambridge. The best test at the moment probably is the PTE academic because it's easier than the rest. So unfortunately, Duolingo is not recognized in Australia. But if you want to go and do a test, I think PTE is cheaper to do in Uzbekistan. I'm not sure about Korea. And also PTE is usually easier. You get higher mark for PTE when compared to IELTS. Let me jump to the questions again, sorry. Where was I? Okay, that one here. So yeah, in terms of transferring, you have to have sufficient funds or scholarship, and then you need to apply for an Australian university. Shahzoda is the educational agent. You need to speak to her in regards to applying for an Australian university. She can help you with that, but make sure you have the funds or you have a scholarship. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do it. Can more people might be waiting. Okay, so I don't think anyone else is waiting at the moment. Can I transfer my degree without finishing it? I don't have an IELTS score. So if you don't have an English score, you would not be able to transfer because you need English to apply for the visa. You might be able to transfer your degree as long as you're accepted in an Australian university. Again, you need to speak to Shahzada about universities. However, for the visa, for the student visa, you need to have an English result. Without that, you cannot get the visa. So you're going to be wasting your time. Currently, I'm studying a master's degree in South Korea. Can I transfer to Australia or should I apply for after graduate? It depends on your master degree. So again, it depends on what you're studying. It depends if you can get a scholarship. It depends on whether or not you'll be accepted in Australia. Technically speaking, yes, you can. However, you have to be very careful. Really depends on how long you've studied already in Korea. In Australia, there's a special visa for people who finish their studies in Australia. It's a graduate visa, this thing here. Now, one of the main requirements for this visa is that you meet the study requirements, and that is you have completed this course as a result of 2 academic years, which is 92 weeks of study. If you have already done part of your degree in Korea and then you move to Australia and your course is less than 2 years, when you graduate in Australia, you would not be able to apply for this visa. This visa allows you to stay in Australia and work for, it depends on what you finish, but you know, it could be 2 years or more, 3 years. Again, we'll see what happens with these changes. So it gives you a few years to remain and work in Australia. And in this time, if your profession is on the skills list, you might even be able to get a permanent visa and stay in Australia forever. But if you've already studied in Korea and you finish part of the degree, and you don't meet the criteria for this, probably it's not a good idea. You might want to start from the beginning in Australia, or you want to finish and then possibly apply for a permanent if your degree allows you to apply for a permanent. So that needs to be checked individually. Thank you for your answer. As I was taught a mechanical engineer without experience, I have money. What if I apply for a master degree of mechanical engineering? Yeah, look, if you apply for a master degree as a mechanical engineer, again, just be very mindful. You need to meet the English requirements, and then you need to meet the study length requirements. Make sure the degree is more than 2 academic years, which is more than 92 weeks. And then potentially, if your English level is good enough and you graduate, you might be able to apply for a permanent visa. If we look at the list over here, this list tells us what professions are in demand at the moment. And we're going to type in mechanical engineer, motor mechanic. So that's even a lower level than a mechanical engineer. Plumbing, lift mechanic, mechanical. Yeah, that's a lower level. That's a technician. So it's a lower level than a mechanical engineer. That's a draft person. This is the engineer. Here, mechanical engineer. So when we scroll up, this is in the best possible list, medium to long term. So at the moment, yes, it's possible to apply for permanent visa. Now, keep in mind that your profession would be your skills and your profession. If you want to study in university to get a master's degree, it's going to be, I don't know, around $40,000 per year in a good university. So, but it's possible. Yes, it's possible as long as you have the funds. Husan, this is a new question. What is the new question? I think that's the question. Oh, that's the one I just answered. Okay. I think I answered that one. Husan, I think that's the same. I just answered your question, right? About the master degree. So technically it's possible as long as you have the funds. Yes. Now we have ran out of time for this seminar. I mean, if anyone has any last questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And if you don't have any more questions, then Shahzoda has left a mobile number. Maybe you can also leave the groups or an email where they can write to you if they're interested in any of the courses or anything more. You can give them information about the discounts for anyone who attended the seminar, and we'll take it from there.
Can you share the link of this website that you are showing currently?
So if I give them this link, it's very important for the people to make sure that they look at this here. It has to be the latest version. This changes. So I can share it. but make sure that you're looking at the latest version here in green, because if it changes, it's not going to be applicable anymore, and you'll be looking at the old information. Okay, so I've shared it, but be very careful when you check things. Same as the visa information. Okay.
Okay, one more question. Can you reply?
Okay, yeah. So software engineer, if you're doing a bachelor, that's a very, very good profession, especially if you're studying in Korea. This profession gives you the opportunity to get both work visas and permanent visas. IELTS, there are two levels of requirements for the IELTS. One of the, I'll show you, give me a second. I'll just do a quick search. One of the first level is for you to obtain your skills assessment. Now, the skills assessment is determined by various organizations. In your case, is this organization over here, Australian Computer Society, they're called. That one here. And skills assessment. Let's see if we can find it straight away. So the different organizations have different requirements. Okay, they do not require English requirement for. Oops, give me a second. Too big. No, does not require English level test for the assessment. So some skills assessing bodies require English, others don't. So then your next English requirement would be for the visa itself. The minimum is a 6 in IELTS or a 50 in each component for PTE. However, if you obtain a higher mark, for example, you obtain a 7 in each component for IELTS, you'd be given more points for your visa application, which means that their chances of being invited are higher. So the higher your English, the better for you, but the bare minimum is 6 in each component. I hope this answers your question. I guess all the information has been included here. Software engineer, I hope this answers what you wanted to find out, but it's a very good profession overall for a permanent visa, even for a work visa. Okay.
Okay,
Shahzoda,
let's finish.
I think we'll finish it up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much to everyone. Thank you for joining the seminar, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you in the future. Rahmat. Bye.
Yes.
Rahmat.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Qatnashganinglar uchun katta rahmat, vaqtinglarni ajratib. Yana savolinglar bo'lsa, qanaqadir qo'shimcha mavzularda ma'lumot olmoqchi bo'lsanglar, o'sha Visa Helper Telegram kanalimizga kirib ko'rsanglar bo'ladi. U yerda juda ham ko'p videolar o'sha berilgan. Chunki ba'zi savollar qaytarilgan va umumiy savollarga javobni o'sha kanalda videolar qo'yganmiz. Talaba vizasi, student vizasi, turist vizasi haqida ham ma'lumotlar berilgan va yana ko'rishingiz mumkin qaysi примерно masalan hamma so'raydi necha pulli oylik olish qaysi joylarga ishga kirish mumkin, qayerdan ish topish mumkin yokida дальнейшем borganda qayerda yashash mumkin, umumiy xarajatlar bir oyda necha pulga tushishi mumkin, shular haqida ham biz oldindan o'sha video qo'yganmiz. Vaqtinglar bo'lsa o'sha kanalni ko'rib chiqinglar. Yerda tayyor o'sha sistemalar bor, o'sha yerga примерно qancha расход qilishlariga qarab turib o'sha hamma narsani oldindan hisoblab chiqish mumkin. Va albatta har bitta ko'plab vizalar haqida ma'lumotlar berilgan. Yana ham qo'shimcha ma'lumot kerak bo'lsa bizga yozinglar menga. Undan keyin qanaqadir fikrga qarorga kelsanglar, unda o'sha immigratsiya agentining individual konsultatsiyasiga yozilib, дальнейшем vizaga topshirishingiz mumkin. Va kanalda ham o'sha viza olganlarni ko'rib chiqsanglar bo'ladi shu kungacha. Yana tez orada mana shu Koreyadagi o'zbeklar uchun tekin webinar qilish maqsadimiz bor va undan keyingi vebinarlarda значит aktiv qo'shiluvchilar sonini aniq bilsak, o'shalarga qarab turib qo'shimcha diskountla berishga harakat qilamiz. Hammangizga katta rahmat vaqtinglarni ajratib kirganinglar uchun. Ishinglarda omad, sog' salomat bo'linglar.